Hi, I'm Dylan, and this is Bourbon United. On today's episode, we're going to review the Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Bourbon, Rye, and Wheated Bourbon. I'll discuss if it's worth the MSRP, make a few comparisons to other Heaven Hill products with similar mash bills and proofs. But before we get into that, here is the Heaven Hill press release video that they released explaining what all went into the product, the grains, and where they got the grains, grain to glass being the whole thing. We'll be right back.
This is a business where it takes a lot of, as my dad would say, patience and perseverance. Throughout our whole history, we've been so squarely focused on quality. Again, going back to the very earliest days, this is just a continuation of what we've been doing for some 87 plus years. Bourbon particularly is one of those iconic consumer products that date back to the very earliest days of our country. So you're thinking, how can we make this a really unique product? We found Beck's Hybrids in central Indiana, a family-owned, family-led company that was passionate about what they did every day.
My father and grandfather actually settled on the land in 1901. He and my dad started the hybrid seed corn business. I came along in 1964, and we had this other new thing called single cross corn. And so both of those were jump starts in the seed corn for farmers because you could do more breeding with it, you could discover more things. As we continue to breed for better hybrids, we also learned that just some things about making better bourbon would be to have very healthy hybrids. Heaven Hill's done an extra job of taking it to the next level by making sure that we start off with good corn. Good healthy corn makes good bourbon.
Then we had to find somebody to help us grow this grain. We went to another family-owned and operated enterprise, Peterson Farms.
My parents and my grandparents were all farmers. We can trace genealogy back to farmers in New York State 13 generations ago. A lot of history with our farming. Year after year, we rotate. Not the same crop is grown in the same location, same geography annually. We use wheat in our rotation. Wheat is a cover crop. The whole goal here is to keep something growing on the ground all the time, to preserve it not only from erosion, but also from degradation from sunlight. We've been employing no-till here since the early 60s. My grandfather was one of the pioneers of no-till. We are doing that on basically 90% of everything we farm, reserves the soil.
The whole process for grain to glass literally starts a year before we ever mash or distill it. We talk with Beck's and with Bernard Peterson to pick a variety of corn that's going to grow best on Bernard's farm right here in central Kentucky, that's going to have a high yield, that's going to make great whiskey. Let's not forget that Kentucky is an ingredient. I mean, everything about growing the whiskey here, I mean, we put it on the label, it's a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. The weather, the water, the climate, the growing conditions, the way the grains grow here in central Kentucky, all contribute to how the whiskey turns out after maturation. They're clearly Heaven Hill whiskeys, but they are unique. It's not a different twist on an HH reg or anything. It is a different mash bill, a different process. They've been aged for a little over 6 years and in a traditional new charred white oak barrel with a number 3 char. Obviously, a large part of my job is maintaining the integrity of the whiskeys we make, but this one, you know, we took it to the next level. It's much more hands-on deep dive into the ingredients. Heaven Hill Grain of Glass truly is a unique series of expressions.
The whole objective is to have a very transparent process.
You'll be able to look at the label and tell which hybrid of corn we used.
We highlight on the label where the seed came from, where it was produced, and all the other characteristics that you need in making certain what this product is all about.
And the whiskey tastes great too, so.
It's like a little bit like the baby being born. That was 7 years ago it was conceived, and now it's being born, so we're all kind of excited.
Is there a sense of pride knowing that our hard work went it? Absolutely. It's beyond words.
We make our products to be enjoyed with friends, and who better friend than the guy growing the grain for you?
We've sourced the corn from Beck's. We sourced the agricultural piece, the growing, from Peterson Farms. Both family-owned, family-led, passionate, extraordinarily focused, eye on quality, along with ourselves, the third partner. That's the magic that makes the whiskey.
So that was the Heaven Hill press release marketing video. Hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it offered a better explanation from the horse's mouth what the grain to bottle expressions mean to them and where they were kind of coming from. So without further ado, this is episode 1. In this episode, it's going to be a full review of the 3 Heaven Hill grain to glass bottles, which are the Rye, the Bourbon, and the Wheated Bourbon. So I have the Rye and the Bourbon, and I have a sample of the Wheated Bourbon. I was not able to grab a bottle of that. A good friend of mine was able to grab the Wheated and shot me over a sample. So we'll review all 3 of these and see what we think. And from there, we'll do a comparison to see, is it worth the MSRP? Is it worth the value? Or is it just a nostalgia thing or a gimmick? So, all right, let's go ahead and get this bourbon opened up. I did have a couple pours from it to let it air out. Don't like to typically do reviews on fresh cracks, so this one's got a little bit of air for a couple days now. Go ahead and get that bourbon poured up. Get the rye. And the wheated bourbon. So let's go ahead and see what we got going here. Okay, so on the nose. Now, this is giving us 107 proof on the nose. I'm getting about 110, 115, so a little hotter on the nose than 107 proof, I feel like. Apples, maybe some red apples like Fiji or Gala apple. Pears, maybe stewed pears, cooked pears. I'm getting a little bit of the oak there on the nose. No caramelized pear, maybe. Slight baking spice. Not bad. Pretty good nose. Okay, let's see what the, not super complex on the nose. Just a little fruit forward, a little bit of oak. Nothing to write home about. Let's check out the palate. Mm. Mm. Good palate. The apples are still there. I would say more red fruit, maybe a little bit of strawberry, raspberry fruit forward there. More on the apple side. A little floral on the palate, which I did not get on the nose. Very backside of the palate, I'm getting a little bit of spice, maybe from the rye on this. So the mash bill on this one is 52% corn, 35% rye, and 13% malt. So a little bit of a higher rye mash bill, but still on the bourbon. So definitely getting some of the spice notes on the back end, which are pretty nice. The finish for me, definitely more oakiness. This is at 6 years. That's what they aged it to. Remember, this is the Beck 6158, and this is a 6-year straight bourbon whiskey. A little pepper on the backside. I'm crediting that to the higher rye mash bill. Overall, pretty solid. Not super complex by any means, but a solid bourbon. Let's go ahead and do the wheated, and we'll do the rye last. Forgot to give you my nose notes. On the nose, I'm getting walnuts, light almonds, a little bit of almond and walnut. So a little nutty, not traditional Heaven Hill nuttiness where it's peanut, but more on the almondy side, a little bit of walnut. Getting some of the bread notes there, which for me are pretty traditional wheat notes. Wheat bread. Definitely getting some oak on the nose. Maybe even a little bit of cedar, like the cedar shavings that you get. It's gonna sound weird, but like from the hamster cage, those cedar type shavings, just on the nose, just there at the end. Overall, good nose. Not getting a whole lot of red fruit or those typical weeder type nose notes for me. Get on with the palate. More of the wheated bread, a little bit of the almond. Also getting some molasses cookie, a little bit of bacon spice there. I want to say it's somewhere between a gingerbread cookie and a molasses cookie somewhere there. A little bit of the roasted molasses notes. Finish with a slight bit of pepper spice. Mash bill on this one is a 52% corn, 35% wheat, and 13% malt. On the bourbon, I was getting a little bit of the malt note, not a ton, which is their typical mash bill. It's on between 13 and 10% malted barley. But with this, I'm getting a little bit more, of the wheat, less of the malt in the bourbon. This one's at 121 proof, which is significantly more than the bourbon was at, which was at 107. So we're quite a bit more on the proof, which to me is bringing it home a little bit better. little bit of pepper on the end there in the finish. A little oakiness. Getting a few tannins there at the very end. But it mellows out pretty good with the sweetness from the molasses finish. Overall, not overly complex either, but of those two, I would probably lean towards the wheated bourbon so far. Let's get on to the rye, see what we think. On the nose, yeah, traditional rye. We got 63% on this rye on the mash bill, 24% corn, and 13% malted barley. So same amount of malted barley in all three. It's just the rye and the corn are being switched out. So higher rye on this one, which I'm digging. Typical rye notes, a little bit of mint, a little bit of slight hint of fresh cut grass. Almost a little floral there, but more of a dried flower. And the oak, I'm getting a little bit of the toasty oak on the nose. Overall, pretty traditional on the nose for a rye. Off to the palate, see what we think. Man, that's nice. Man. Some things on the palate here I did not get on the nose. Picking up a little bit more on some caramel, almost like a butterscotch caramel flavor there. A little bit more complex than the last two. You get a couple extra layers. Getting the rye spice even on the mid palate, almost like a cigar tobacco type note, where after drawing a nice cigar, you get that spice on the backside there. This is nice. I'm really enjoying this. At the very end, the very finish. Now this one's at 123.2 proof. So this is the higher of the three on the proof. It doesn't drink that hot. I'd say it drinks about 110, 115, which is nice. I was hoping for a little bit more punch. With it being at 123, I was hoping it'd be like 130-ish on the punch. I like the rye at a higher proof point. Getting a little hint of cinnamon on the final finish there. Maybe a little smokiness. I think that's also what I might be picking up with the cigar tobacco type note. Overall, really nice. Traditional rye with a couple extra hints. I like the caramel and the butterscotch note that I'm getting on the mid palate, which I usually don't get with a lot of ryes unless they're aged a lot longer. So all three of these are at 6 years. Usually when ryes for me are at 12 to 14 year range, I get a lot more complexity and get some more of the bourbon type notes where you get the caramel and the butterscotch and the vanillas. This one I'm getting some of that, so that's actually pretty nice. What do I think? Overall, they're all great. Good to great. What could we compare these to say if they are worth the MSRP, which we know is anywhere from 95 to 105, depending on where you're at in the country. Here in Louisiana, these were right at 95, where I got one of them, and the other one was at 105. So that's the range I'm using, just due to between Total Wine and Acquista Pace and different stores around the North Shore that we've been able to find these at. That's roughly the right price range that we found them at. Is that appropriate for what you're getting? Value for buck? I don't want to judge that just yet. So what I'd like to do is talk about and look at some comparative whiskeys in the same family of Heaven Hill, but look and see and compare what they are like compared to these. So let's do this. We here. For me, the closest that I'm going to have that, or the Heaven Hill brand would have to compare to the grain to glass bourbon, straight bourbon whiskey, is the Heaven Hill bottled and bond. Regular Heaven Hill bottled and bond, we're looking at somewhere between 30 and 45 bucks, depending on where you find it. I've seen it a little cheaper, I've seen it a little more than that, and we all know our bottled and bonds are at 100 proof. So comparing to this, we're at 107. So you lose 7 proof. Is it really worth it? Compared to, we're going to definitely do a quick tasting just to remind me and do a quick side-by-side comparison. Now, our mash bills, how different are they? This is where it's not quite as good of a comparison. So our bottled bond Heaven Hill mash bills at 78% corn, 12% malted barley, and 10% rye. So roughly 20-ish% more corn and about half the malted barley in our standard bottled bond. Roughly the same amount of rye. It's 10% rye. The grain to glass is 13. So that's pretty close. This is 7-year versus 6-year. So that's pretty close. And now the big one is price. 90 to 100, 35 to 40. So literally you can get 2 of these for the price of this one. Give it a quick taste for comparison. Some things I'm getting on the nose from the standard bottle and bond that I was not getting with the grain to glass bourbon. A little bit of leather, some tobacco, some honey. For me, more of the traditional bourbons type notes where it's caramel, vanilla, oakiness, leather, all your very quintessential aromas that we expect from a standard bourbon. And for me, that's probably due to the higher corn percentage in the mash bill versus this one being at 52. This one's at 78. On the palate, not saying that the grain to glass bourbon was complex, but this is definitely less complex. So I get a little bit of tobacco, a little bit of spice. Some of the caramel falls short for me. That's about it. There's not a whole lot going on there. Yeah, to me, that's what this bottle's always been missing, with some proof. So for me, there's not much of a finish. I feel like it falls a little short, being at only 100 proof. What I do get at the very end are some vanilla, some cherries, almost like a cardinal cherry. We see at Christmas, that cardinal cherry chocolate flavor at the very end. Just a hint on the last bit of the finish. It drops off so quick. It leaves me wanting more of that for sure, but that lower proof for me is kind of where it falls short. So comparing this to this, is what it's lacking in proof, not that it's but 7 proof lower, worth double. Is the complex flavors or the lack of complexity from this to this, I'd say it's 2 or 3 points higher on complexity out of 10. Only because I'm getting a couple extra flavors on the palate, on the nose, very similar, not a whole lot going on there. On the finish, I'm definitely getting a little bit more on the grain to glass. Maybe it's that extra 7% on the proof. Would I buy this again at, let's say, 100 bucks? I don't think I would. Not that I don't like it, but I can get 2 of these for the price of this. I'm not getting enough from the straight bourbon to say that it's worth the extra money. That's just my opinion. That's kind of where I am with these two in comparison. All right, the rye. What are we going to compare the rye to? So for me, the best comparison I had or could think of was the Pikeville rye, and for me, there wasn't a whole lot close enough to compare for the proof, the age, and the mash bills. So I thought this would be a good comparison because it's about half the cost. A lot easier to find, readily available pretty much at any store around the country at roughly about the same price. What do most people associate Pikesville rye from Heaven Hill as a bourbon drinker's rye, an entry-level rye. A lot of people that are new to drinking rye or been told, hey, you should try rye. This one's recommended a lot. Why? It's at 51% rye, so it's almost half and half. Technically it's rye, it's 51%. Not 51% corn, but it's, for me, a 50-50. You could go either way with it. I always recommend this as a good starter rye because it's basically almost a high rye bourbon. It's at 110 proof, so we're going to be 9 or so points below on proof. Close to 10, let's just say 10 points lower on proof than the grain to glass one. Same exact age statement, but we're about 11 percentage points lower on the rye, roughly half the amount of corn, and then malted barley is roughly the same. On the nose, cherry, cinnamon, apple. For me, I do not get all the traditional nose of a rye. I don't get the mint. I don't get any of the grassy notes. I don't get, in blinds, you'd probably struggle to find anything that would associate this one with a rye. On the other hand, the Heaven Hill, you are going to get more of the traditional rye noses, all the notes that we get from rye. So if you want a rye on the nose, this is definitely easier to pick out. This one's closer to all the typical things you get on the nose of a bourbon. So cherry, little bit of cinnamon, apple note there, but nothing crazy, not overly complex by any means. On the palate, little cherry, little vanilla, little caramel, super traditional type bourbon notes, as you can tell what we get from bourbons. Finish, for me, as 110 proof, I feel like it drinks below that. For me, this one's always drinking about at 100, so I never really got a big finish from it. I feel like it drops off a little bit of the notes I do get on the finish. On the finish, you definitely get more of the rye spice there. It kind of finally comes up, bites you a little bit there at the end, just a little tingle. More so on the final finish there, but overall, easy crushable rye. Something you can just grab and pour and not even have to think about it. Not complex by any means. Comparing these two, because it's the closest comparison I had for Heaven Hill products to say, is it worth the extra 40 to 50 bucks, basically double the value. For me, this one's closer being worth it. Why? I feel like this one's got a few extra notes. Is it worth $90 to $105 more? I would say no. It's probably worth, I would say, 65 to 85 range. Are there other ryes in that price range that are better? Probably so. So I don't know that I would buy that at that price again. I would say I will not. Of these two, this is definitely the Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Rye. Definitely a bigger punch, more spice than you're going to get with the Pikesville Rye. Closest I could compare, overall, you can get two of these for the price of one of these. I would say find a different rye. This is a Bourbon Drinker's Rye, barely a rye, rough comparison, but if I had to pick one of these two for value, it'd probably be Pikesville Rye overall. Cool. Okay, we will get back to the wheated bourbon. Wheated bourbon. So what do we have to compare it to? Closest I had, so there is the Bernheim Rye, the Bernheim Wheated Bourbon, barrel proof. I couldn't find any, I don't have any. It's as close to the mash bill as probably possible, being that that's a Heaven Hill Wheated product. There's also a few other Heaven Hill Wheated products people don't really think about. This one's going to be a weird comparison, but I have multiple bottles readily available, so I figured it was worth a try to compare it to for a wheated bourbon. So I'm going to compare it and look at the value and notes of the Larceny Barrel Proof. Probably not the fairest comparison, being that we know in the last 2 years, last 6 batches of this, this has been a crowd favorite, particularly with C923 and a few of the other batches that have been bangers. But in comparison, we know that the wheated Heaven Hill is 35% wheat, 52% corn, and 13% malted barley. The Larceny's at 68% corn, 20% wheat, so it's about 15% different on the wheat mash bill, but it is a wheated bourbon. So, value. Talked about Heaven Hill being 90 to 105. This one you can catch anywhere from 50 to 75 bucks, so not quite half, depending on where you get it. On a good day, it is about half the value of the price. On the nose. Yeah. Oh, man. That's nice. This particular one is C923 is 126 proof, which is comparative on the Heaven Hill Wheated Bourbon at 121 proof. So a good comparison there. Probably not the fairest of comparisons on the palate, because you're getting all the big, huge, bold flavors that we all know and love from Larceny Barrel Proof. Bang for buck, Larceny Barrel Proof of these two. Bernheim Barrel Proof will probably be a fairer review to compare against. Can't compare it because I don't have any, but overall, the wheated and the rye are going to be neck and neck for me. At the end of the day, I think the rye outwins the trilogy for me. The wheated would be right there, neck and neck, right behind it. And for me, the reason those two are higher of the three, because of the proof. Both these are sitting above 120 proof, and the bourbon is down close to one. It's at 107, so for me, that's sub 110. If it was struggling anywhere and it could use a little extra proof, that would probably help. So rye, for me, the wheated, and then the bourbon. Higher proof definitely is where Heaven Hill, I feel like, is in its best realm and sweet spot. So that'll do it for this review. I hope that helped a little bit for you guys and gals out there looking for these 3 bottles and wondering if it's worth the hype, is it worth the hunt? For me, I'd say no. There's some other Heaven Hill products that are equally worth it, if not better. please like, subscribe, and comment on this video. I need subscribers, help grow the channel, help us be able to do more things in the future. Until next time, this is Dylan with Bourbon.